You're listening to Be the Exception podcast, episode 173. I don't know about you, but adapted tools to help our learners feel more independent, confident, and growth is key as special education teachers. Well, today I have Tara from Little Autism Learners here to chat with us all about this. And she is really breaking down the different strategies and ways, as well as the benefits that this has, both as a special education teacher, but also as a speech language pathologist. So let's go ahead and jump on into today's podcast episode with Tara.
Welcome to Be the Exception podcast. As teachers, each one of us has something that comes naturally to us that others would love to know more about. Throughout this podcast, we'll chat with amazing professionals and offer easily digestible tips that you can quickly implement in your classroom or business, helping you stand out with things you do really well. Your host, Dawn Ellis, is a qualified educational specialist with 10 years of special education experience, published journal articles, and was a state finalist for Elementary Teacher of the Year. Dawn provides tools for special education teachers to perform at their very best, helping deal with the frustrating daily obstacles of being an educator. She offers a roadmap of resources and strategies to make you a confident leader in your school and community. So if you're ready to start the conversation, learn from others, and grow together, you're in the right place. Now here's your host, Dawn Ellis.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Be the Exception podcast. I have a very special guest here today to chat with us all things adapted books and how you can integrate them in your special education classrooms or with your learners. So help me welcome Tara from Autism Little Learners. Hey girl, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad you are here and ready to chat with our listeners today just about how you use such a powerful tool in your day-to-day teaching. But before we jump into that, give us a little background of who you are, what you do, and how you've gotten to this point today.
Sounds good. Well, I am Tara Phillips. I'm a speech language pathologist. Some of you might have seen I have been Tara Tuchel on social media, but I got married last fall. So that's why I have the name change. But speech language pathologist, I've been in the public schools for 23 years. And that whole time I have focused specifically on autism. And so I was at the elementary level and ran a communication-based classroom for autistic kids, like K through 2. And then the last 10 years, I've been at the early childhood level and co-teaching with a special ed teacher, which has been a real treat to be able to work that connected. I know a lot of our skills overlap at that level, but learning from a special education teacher as a speech therapist has been really awesome.
That is amazing. So you've had this background of speech therapy and then working with kind of that preschool age where there's so much different like motor and cognitive and adaptive learning happening, but you're able to work with that early childhood specialist to kind of target all of those goal areas is pretty amazing. So tell us a little bit about maybe as you've gone on this journey, which you've had lots of years of experience. That's amazing. What is one lesson that you learned along the way that you wish you had learned sooner or can impart on someone else who is like, hey, maybe don't do it this way?
Yeah. Well, when you asked me that question, the first thing that popped into my head is parents. Like, I feel like I've always respected parents and listened to them, but I think the older I've gotten and the further into my career, like they really do know their child the best, and they're your best resource in finding out like maybe why are they doing what they're doing, or if they're saying a certain phrase, a gestalt over and over, what does that mean? You know, parents are the best resource that we have in our back pocket. And I think underutilized because it can be hard to, within our busy day, find time to connect with so many students' parents. But a little example was way back. This is probably when I really learned like parents know everything. Way back when I was at the elementary level, I had a student and his name was Daniel. And he would always write an N at the end of his name. And it wasn't a capital N. It wasn't like middle name or last name. And one of his regular ed teachers was like, you don't have an N at the end of your name. Don't write the N. Like, talk about pick your battles, right, Dawn?
Right.
So she was picking that battle, and I was like more of the detective, like, okay, we got to figure out what this means because he keeps doing it. It has to mean something. So I finally called his mom, which I should have done right away. But she said, oh, yeah, it's because his brothers' names are Brian and Stephen. So his brothers' names end with an N, and he wanted to be like them.
Yeah.
And then it's totally endearing and adorable. And once I told the regular ed teacher that, she was like cool with it. So use the parents, they know them best, and they know all those little things that we would probably never figure out on our own.
You're so right. And I mean, they're with them the longest. So many times I feel like you have all these back to school forms, but one of my favorite things to give is just a preference reinforcer sheet because they know the ins and the outs, what works and what doesn't. And so having that in your arsenal to be able to provide access to information for the kids and give them the reinforcers that they are willing to work for, you're able to get so much more out of them. So yeah, I love that, just being aware that the parent has so much knowledge and to tap into that. So that's amazing. Okay, so you have an adapted book club, right? And that is kind of your area of expertise. And for any of our listeners who may not know what in the heck an adapted book is, tell us a little bit about your journey of starting this membership, but also just what it is. Do you mind?
Yeah, I'd love to. I love talking about adapted books because I've just seen them make a difference for so many kids in like their engagement and beginning literacy skills. And I think way back, like we've been adapting books for a long time, like putting pictures inside with Velcro. And I feel like as an educator, I would go through phases like, oh, I'm really into adapted books, or I'm remembering to use them more. And then they'd kind of fade out over the years. And so the last 3 years, I've really gotten back into using them consistently because for our little ones, and probably any age, they provide predictability and they structure up the books. So I have a lot of kids when they're young that they'll maybe flip through a book really fast. And in fact, I had a parent this last year, her son is 3, and I showed her how to make adapted books, gave her some to bring home, showed her how to do it herself with books they already have. And she made some and she started using them with him. And he was the kind of thinker, the kind of learner that once he learned something, learned a routine, he's got it. So then he could transfer that skill to the next book and the next book. And she emailed me, and I have goosebumps right now. She said, my son has never sat on my lap and let me read a book to him. And after starting adapted books, he will sit with me and he knows exactly what he's supposed to do. He puts the matching picture in and he sits on my lap as we read a book together. And I have goosebumps. I'm like, it was just so amazing.
That is incredible. And I think it does really provide even non-readers an ability to participate and that they have value in the process of reading, even if they don't know what the words mean yet. Does that make sense? And so I love that you've taken this and just kind of run with it and made it more accessible to not only educators, but families as well, to where they have those success stories. So
I
incredible.
100% done, like making it accessible for kids who maybe aren't reading yet. Kids where we can start at the matching level, or even if they're not matching, we can give them the picture that goes on each page. It doesn't have to be a test, right? We can just share that moment with them. And all we're teaching is to put the picture on the Velcro to start. And then some of those other skills like matching and vocabulary will start coming. And what I started doing, what I heard from people is like, I want to adapt books, but like, where do I get the pictures? Like it's daunting to think about creating your own. And so that's a couple years ago, I started adapting board books because at the early childhood level, we need the durability.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the pages are going to get ripped out. So I started adapting board books and I put them together on Teachers Pay Teachers in themed sets of like 6 per theme. And then I started getting so many adapted books that's when I started the adapted book library, because that way people could pay a low monthly fee and just have access to search for whatever book they want. And I'm in the process of building it as big as I can. I'm hoping to have like hundreds and hundreds of books by the end of the summer.
That's so awesome. So you say you have pieces for the board books of books that are already created by other authors. And do you also do the ones like I know I use in my classroom, just like pictures inside of other picture books, so to accompany or to like kind of build that engagement with my classroom, but then do you also have adapted books that you like would bind and create yourself?
That is such a good question. I do. So in the adapted book library in particular, that's where I'm building like kind of supplemental activities to go with all these books too. But there's a section that's just board books and a section that's paperback books that I'm starting because some of the early elementary educators out there want that. I tried one in my classroom in May, and literally he was so excited. It was a Pete the Cat book. He was so excited and he came over, ripped off the first picture and the whole page ripped out. And I'm like, that's why I have trouble using.
That's why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, it happens. And it was out of pure excitement. So like, how can you, and he was really worried about it. He had to help me tape it back in. So we got it all fixed, but I do try to stick with the board books, but I'll have both in the library. And then those other ones you're talking about, I usually call them interactive visual books because like, I don't know what else to call them, but yeah, you bind them yourself. And those you can have errorless ones where they just are putting a picture in. It doesn't have to match like by color or anything like that. And the supplemental activities for the board books and paperback books are exciting because I have got a request to make larger images so that people could use them as like flannel board pieces to kind of act out the book. And also I started in the library adding a visual art project to go with each of the books. So I'm hoping using literacy and kind of expanding into other things, like it helps communication and all the things you teach in special ed.
Yeah, so many things. And I think that like if parents and early educators, early education teachers use it, so that I am like in a self-contained setting in a like K-3 position, and we use adapted books, but we use them in science and social stories to reinforce those skills, whether it's errorless or if it recalls simple information, and along with counting and so many other things. But then you're able to reinforce activities beyond just a worksheet that they weren't doing at all anyways. But this allows you to have participation, to show that joint attention in an activity, having so much being able to recall information and so many other skills that you can monitor just with that one single activity. So
awesome. I love that you use them in science and social studies.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
I've created like a bundle for science and social studies for the whole year, and they include adapted books, and it's just answering yes and no questions. I kept it very, very simple, to where all the kids can participate in that, or if task cards are better or whatever, but that gives options, and it is on varying levels so that they can interact and be a part. So
Oh, I love it.
that's amazing. Yeah. So tell us with adapted books with, well, what I call adapted book, what you called an interactive, say it again, the
Interactive visual book.
yes. Okay. So your interactive visual book, if families or educators want to create or have these, what are the materials that are needed in order to have, and even I guess the picture adapted books, but what materials are needed in order to put those things together?
Yeah, I have I just created a guide. And so it's just like, I don't know, 5 or 6 pages. And it's how to make adapted books in 3 steps
Yeah.
because we want it to be easy, right? And I have a couple of hacks in there, like what do you do if you don't have a laminator, that kind of thing. So there's some workarounds there. And so
We'll link that in the show notes.
yeah, I'll get that to you. Like I literally just finished it yesterday. So it's hot off the press. You'll be the first one. And so there's that. And then later in the summer, I'm going to host another adapted book challenge where you can make your own over 5 days and walk away with adapted books for home or school at no cost.
That's amazing. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure and link those things so people can find that if they want to connect and be a part of the challenge or just learn more about the benefits of adapted books. But as we like talk a little bit more about it, what are some like benefits or action steps as far as preparing those adapted books for the back to school season? What will teachers see by implementing these books in the upcoming year?
Well, I think one thing as far as benefits is creating something where you can have more active engagement. And that's one of the biggest things when I work with my little ones, my little autistic students, like having that engagement. And we're fine if there's like solo things they want to do on their own, but we want to really make these meaningful connections and have that active engagement. And it's great with books because a lot of my students have characters they love. So your other question is kind of how to get going on it with the back to school. Find books that you already have, whether you're a parent or a teacher, find books you already have and pick a couple. Don't overwhelm yourself. Keep it simple. Pick a couple of those and then start searching for where you can get pictures. Sometimes if you just Google the name of the book and you put in pictures and you put in PDF in the search, you might find some free ones that are just out there in Google land somewhere that you can download to get started. You could use Google Images, and you could also take pictures of the characters in the book and kind of minimize them when you print them off and laminate and just put those right in the book. And those wouldn't require you to purchase anything from anybody.
And so what would be the benefits that they would see within the kids or implementing them with their sessions if they're an SLP or if they're using them in their classroom, if they're a special ed teacher, for the kids once they are using them and teach them how to use them?
Yeah, well, kind of like I said, the active engagement, but then also beginning vocabulary skills can be increased by using them. And it keeps little hands busy and gives them something to do. You could tell I'm mostly with 3 and 4-year-olds. So, that instead of just sitting and trying to keep their attention with just your words, you're giving them something to do and keeping their hands busy. And using adapted books I've seen over time, increase that attention span too. And I think at the beginning of the school year, that's something we really, really want to work on, is trying to increase that attention span so that they can be doing activities and stay with us.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think that is very important. So thank you for sharing that. Are there any other resources that teachers can educate themselves on to to learn more about adapted books? I know you mentioned the challenge, and we'll link that in the show notes, but is there anything else that they could check out before the beginning of the school year?
Well, I think, from me personally, the guide and the challenge, but also going on Teachers Pay Teachers and checking out, like, Dawn, what you have for adapted books, checking out Autism Little Learners, what we have for adapted books. And even if you just put in adapted books, you're going to find something that meets your needs.
Yeah.
And so just keep looking and find kind of what you're looking for, given the books that you have and the level of your students in your classroom.
I agree. I think that there is an array, but just kind of starting, like just being willing to get something and going from there. And kind of knowing you don't have to have all the different pieces of like the requirements. You can kind of make do and then see if it works and kind of work from there to see, like, do you need errorless or do you need a simplified question with, or maybe matching? So kind of knowing what your students' needs are from year to year can help drive that. So,
Oh, yeah. And kind of what you're explaining there too is like, keep it simple and just start. Like, I've heard the term imperfect action a lot lately. Like, doesn't have to be perfect, but let's just take action on something small. And then that's going to help move us forward.
for sure. I'm gonna take that personally. Like,
okay.
I love that. All right. So is there any other advice you would give your younger self or other teachers who are maybe beginning their journey in an early childhood position, or maybe, like I have some kindergartners right now that way benefit from adapted books in getting started with it, besides just do it?
Yeah, I think it kind of to my younger self, like a recap of what we talked about, like talk to the parents, use a reinforcement inventory, like Dawn said, find out what books they love. So if you have a student that's loving Pete the Cat right now, that would be a good book to reach that student. So maybe looking at your students, finding out what the parents say about the books they like, and then using that to choose your first handful of books that you're going to adapt. Because when we use what's motivating to them, we've got more of their attention and buy-in, and we're building that relationship, which is something we want to do at the beginning of the school year anyway.
For sure. I think that's such a great point. And using what they enjoy already, because then you can, once you get them used to that one, then you can introduce other skills or books and then use that as the reinforcer once they get it done. I mean, it just, oh yeah, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. So whenever you have those tough days at work, whether it is, doing all the paperwork or teaching the kids and just all your lessons didn't go right, what helps keep you motivated just to keep going and to show up each and every day, especially these past few years that have been tough on educators and specialists?
Really tough. I do have a file in my desk at work that the title on it is Why. And in there is where I put like any nice notes or emails or cards that I get from families. So it's fun to go through that once in a while and hear that your positive feedback that you've gotten from others. It kind of solidifies why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And then for me, it's definitely just thinking about wins with the kids. So it might be, I still remember this one little girl I had, and she was with us a year before she ever said anything verbally. And then she said bubbles. And like, I can still recall it because it was so amazing. And I had this other little student who was non-speaking, and he started to use a device. And, when they're 3, you don't know exactly what they have going on receptively. And so we didn't know how quickly he would take to this. But one day we're sitting at snack, I think it was, and he like went in a couple different folders, and all of a sudden it said, "This is boring." And we were like, touche, little guy. Like, that is the most amazing sentence I've ever heard in my life. So those kind of things, I think things that make you laugh too can really help through those tough times.
For sure. I think you're so right. That reminds me of a story when we were talking about a learner um who lost his like glasses frames this year, and we have another like learner who is nonverbal, and it was funny because like he popped his glass frames out too, and we were like, "Are you kidding me right now?" Like he understood and heard, and then he was like, so had this smirk on his face like the rest of the day. Thankfully, we were able to pop him back in. It was just like, okay, I got it. You hear what we're saying, and you understand more than sometimes you let on. But it was just like, okay. But we laughed and laughed because
he's like joking. I
in his
love it.
way. You're so right. So awesome. Okay, so as we kind of finish up this episode, what is your favorite school supply that will always bring a smile to your face?
You have to know this as a special educator.
I feel like
Velcro. Velcro for sure.
I agree. I got this like wish list request from my school recently, and to update our Amazon wish list, and it was like, how much Velcro can I add without looking completely crazy? Because like people are like, you're never gonna go through all that, and it's like October and you actually did, and you need more.
And specifically Velcro dots, especially if you're doing adapted books. It makes it way easier.
I couldn't agree more. So are you a hard on card, or do you do like hard on the booklet? What's your preferred method?
I do hard on the booklet, and I think it's just, I know a lot of people do hard on the card, but it just was like the way it was when I started, whoever had the classroom before me, and it just stuck with that.
Gotcha. Whatever you decide, either way is fine, but like you just have to stick to it, because I know there have been times where I'll be like, can you help put this together or whatever, on days where we had like paraprofessionals, and like they would do hard on both sides, and I'm just like, so I can have nice things, you know. So
and then it creates 1,000 times more work for you to try to pull them off. I think we've all been there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Tara, I know I've learned a lot from you today, and I really appreciate you taking time to chat with our listeners. But again, will you tell all of our listeners where they can find you, connect, and learn from you from this point forward, and all things adapted books?
Yeah, autismlittlelearners.com. And then same thing on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, just look under autismlittlelearners.com. And that's where you can find information about the adapted books and adapted book library. But thank you so much for having me, Dawn.
Yes, I'm so glad you were able to come on and just teach me and our listeners so many things. So thank you for sharing your knowledge.
You're so welcome.